announcements.
Morris.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to, the addition to it about the request from the McNally Community Association or whatever they call it.
Under 5? Or you got that on there already?
Oh, we did, right?
No, we haven't, but we can certainly speak to it.
Okay, I thought 5 or, yeah. No, that's what, that is 6.
What is 5?
The letter 5 is McNally Community Association. You're working on it already though, right?
For the next meeting, we have a
Yeah.
report drafted.
So we just adding that then as a notice of,
I don't even think it needs really to be added. We've got it prepared for the next agenda.
Okay, good.
The only, if I may, the only reason I put it on, I thought, we could probably deal with that today so things can be speeded up a little bit, because it sounds like to me that's something, it should not wait too much longer because they gotta get at it. And the next meeting won't be till, 2 weeks from now.
So Tracy, what do you want to do?
Well, there's
Larry,
CEO.
what do you want to do?
My suggestion, Mr. Chairman, is, we probably should ideally have a report to accompany the letter we received from the McNally Association. I have spoken to the sender of the letter in person and on the phone, and they appeared outwardly to be completely comfortable with coming next week in 2 weeks, May 16th, to the next council meeting as an appointment, because they would actually like to be present to speak to it too. So if we did it today, or tried to move things forward, they wouldn't have that opportunity, but ultimately, council's call. My suggestion, in all respect to Councillor Zeenstrom, Mr. Chairman, is that we hold out for the 2 weeks, May 16th.
Councillor Zeenstrom?
Yeah, thank you for that, Larry. I'll withdraw that request then.
Tracy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Larry and I spoke a little bit this morning about this, and maybe in the interest of expediting it a little bit, we can have a bylaw drafted to go along with the report next week, so that we don't have to wait till the next meeting to give first reading to the bylaw. So, I mean, either way, if you dealt with it today, the bylaw still wouldn't be ready until the 16th. So
Okay.
if we do both together, we won't have to wait until the June meeting for the bylaw.
So then you're asking, do you want to leave it till the next meeting?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
Is everybody okay with that? Okay. So then, we're adding the, that one, the Lethbridge Quitting Society. Are we adding that one in? They're asking for a request for our support for an honorary degree for somebody. But they don't want somebody to know. Who is this? If I say they're gonna know, everybody's gonna know.
Oh, okay.
Yes?
Thank you. We could do that in closed meeting under the Freedom of Information Protection and Privacy Act, when some kind of accolade or award or praise, if you will, is given to a member, and it needs to be secret. That is one of the conditions under which we could move and just discuss it briefly at a closed meeting.
So you're asking to add that to close the month? Am I getting that right? Okay. Yes.
Of that nature.
So we're adding it to M1. What's it going to be called? Huh? What are we calling it? We're just adding it as a list of motion, I think. But we're adding it as a, what are we adding it as?
Twinning Society letter.
Twinning Society letter of support. Good recommendation, Mr. Chairman.
Under M1, right? Is that, yes. Is everybody okay with that? Okay. Yeah, I don't know the way my name is going, but anyway, I think it is. Does anybody have anything else?
I'll move the agenda with the additions of
I'm having a really good day. Dawn. So you're wanting to add the motion?
Yeah. So, if you just give me. Just added the matter to be discussed. Just an amendment to the agenda. The agenda's moved.
So we're just asking the motion to be adjourned, or added?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, the matter, not really so much the motion, we need to discuss it. So,
So as amended.
So we're asking them the motion to be moved as agended, or
Amended.
how come I'm having such a bad day?
Blame the tie.
I'm gonna fight with the top controls this whole. I can.
So what we're asking then is, we want the agenda to be amended
By adding one.
by adding one thing.
Correct.
Okay, so is everybody comfortable with that?
Well, I was, but not anymore. Yes, I am.
Good. Carried. Oh, what? Oh, good, yes, okay. Is everybody in favor of that? Thank you. Carried. Good. There we, are we okay with that?
All is well, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you.
Very good.
So is there any unfinished business? Sorry?
The minutes.
So in other words, you're saying the unfinished business is the minutes? What the hell am I doing today then?
We haven't voted on the
We didn't ask for a motion to approve the minutes, that's all.
Okay.
Is this our first meeting?
It must be mine. So what are you doing?
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
Could I just make a motion for a short recess, please?
Good.
Yeah.
Carrie? Or everybody approve of that?
Yes.
Good.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is a public hearing for two bylaws, bylaw 19-007 and 19-008, which is an amendment to the Interclean Thompson Area Structure Plan, and also an amendment to the land use bylaw from Lethbridge Urban Bridge to Group Country Residential. First reading of this bylaw was held at the beginning of April, on April the 4th, and so we're moving into the public hearing. The application is to amend the area structure plan to allow for the inclusion of an additional parcel to be split in this particular area structure plan. The parcel in question is this parcel, as you can see on your screen, owned by Mr. John Fair, and it is Lot 3, Block 1, Plan 1512847. And it was included in the area structure plan, but it was never anticipated to be subdivided. So in order for Mr. Fair to move forward with his application, proposed application, he needs to amend the area structure plan and also amend the zoning, which is currently Lethbridge Urban Fringe, and that would have to go to Group Country Residential in order to accommodate the subdivision as he wishes. So this application was reviewed by county administration and by external agencies, and it complies with the municipal development plan in terms of sections 6.2.3 and 6.3.3, in that it is an area that we would allow for country residential development. It's contiguous with other similar developments. As you can see on the air photo, there's residential across the canal to the east and also to the north and to the south of this particular parcel. The creation of the additional parcel would have very limited impact on the adjacent area, as mentioned, there is already country residential in the area. The area structure plan technical requirements were reviewed by the Municipal Services Department to ensure that the drainage plan that was presented back when the original area structure plan was approved was still compliant, and that review determined that it was compliant with that plan. They don't need to create any more swales. There's no additional infrastructure required to accommodate an additional lot. The application was circulated to the City of Lethbridge. They had no comments with regards, or no objections, I should say, to the proposed development. We also received comments from Alberta Transportation and the St. Mary's Irrigation District, and they also had no objections to this particular application or the proposed applications. The proposed bylaws were advertised on the April 9th and 16th editions of the Sunny South News and sent to the adjacent landowners. No comments or concerns were submitted to the county when this report was written, and also in the time since this report was written, no comments or concerns were received by any adjacent landowners or anybody that would be duly impacted by the proposed development. So with that, we would recommend that bylaws 19-007 be read a second and third time, and we would also recommend that bylaw 19-008, which is the rezoning application, also be read a second and third time. Are there any questions of council at this time for this application?
Am I the chairman? Okay, good.
Is there anybody wishing to speak in favor or of the amendment of the bylaw? Seeing none, is there anybody wishing to speak in favor of
Same opposition.
in opposition to the bylaw? Seeing none, does council have any questions? Seeing none, after the presentation, council may allow council to ask questions. You know, any questions? So,
I'd move to close the public hearing, Mr. Chairman.
anybody opposed? All in favor?
So with that, Mr. Chairman, now you can move on to second. What I would recommend is proceed with bylaw 19-007. You can proceed with second and third reading as council desires for that particular bylaw, and then after that do bylaw 19-008.
Second reading. Oh, almost second reading.
All those in favor?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll move second, or third reading of bylaw 19-007.
All those in favor? And, recommend that, the bylaw 19-008 be read a second time. And then the bylaw the third time. First and second. Oh, then
So Paul will move that.
Yeah, Paul, I'll move second reading.
And, all in favor? Then, recommendation for third reading.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, everybody.
I'll just stay here.
Move, presenting the next one.
Yes, I'll present the quarterly report for the Planning and Development Department. So, first of all, I just wanted to, before I get into my report, as there was 5 councilors at the CPAA, Community Planning Association, annual conference, the last few days, we had a busy last few days, but it was a really good conference. Stephen Torrey missed out. But it was really good, but I know you're busy. It was an excellent conference this year. I thought, and I'm not biased because I'm on the board, but it was really good. It was really well done. I think everybody took away a lot from that. So, and I really appreciate the support from our county council and the county in general for supporting and sponsoring that particular conference. Just so you know, my workload increased a little bit. I am now the vice chair for the South Region for the CPA board. So, which I gladly take on. I think it's a great organization. So I'm looking forward to working more closely and doing more stuff with council, and hopefully that'll help benefit the county too. So now I will dive into my report. Sorry, just had to plug that in a little bit. So this is the first quarter report for 2019. As with the first quarter of any type of report, there's not a lot that's really going on. We're just gearing up for a few bigger projects. Development permitting is just starting. So, but in the first quarter, which goes from January to March, we did the Turin growth study was completed, and the Iron Springs growth study is nearing completion. Later today, I'll be presenting on the Turin growth study, and which is in your agenda package. I don't know if you had a chance to review the whole thing, but it's quite a good, concise document for county council and administration to move forward on growth potential in that particular hamlet. We have been working on our rural-to-rural intermunicipal development plans. The MD Little Creek IDP has had first reading with council, and we will be moving forward with the public hearing. I do believe it is at the next council meeting. The one with Vulcan County is started. The open house will be held hopefully at the end of May. Just have to check everybody's calendars to make sure that can be accommodated. And with the County Warner and Cardston County, those ones have been both started, so we're moving along at a fairly good pace with that. And I'm very pleased with the progress so far. With regards to development permits, so far at the end of March, we had 44 development permits that were submitted. And with, we had 30 that were issued, 14 applications were still in circulation. And the rest of the permits required some further documentation before they could be processed. Of the permits issued, we had 11 residential, 4 accessory building, 5 commercial and industrial, 7 agriculture, 2 signs, and 1 home occupation. So that's basically on par with what we've seen in previous years. It's very similar actually to what we had last year, where we also had 44 development permits. So year before, in 2017, we had a large amount of permits coming in. I think we're kind of moderating that a little bit, but we're still fairly busy, I would say, in terms of the applications and the information, getting the information that's required. For building permits, we had 126 permits issued, and so that includes plumbing, electrical, gas, private sewage, and building permits. That was received by Park Enterprises in that first quarter. I think once we've done this for a few years, we'll find out how that compares to other years. We don't really have a good comparison just yet, just because we've only been doing this for a year and a half. But I'm told that Park is quite busy. They're growing their business, and they're being very successful. We enjoy working with them a lot. We just finished our annual internal review for the Safety Council. I think Larry just submitted that this last week, so we're on point with making sure that we have all of our information in line to ensure that we keep our accreditation. For subdivisions, 7 subdivision applications were approved, none were refused. For the appeal board, there was 1 development permit that was lingering from 2018 that we had a hearing on January 31st. The appeal board did deny that appeal and upheld the decision of the development authority. It was for a setback waiver for a shop building. For redesignations, we've had a busy first quarter. We've had five applications that have come forward for county council's consideration, all of which were approved. And then we have 4 others that are in process right now. So it has been quite active on that, and people are still wanting to develop. They're wanting to change what they have to meet the needs that they have for their particular business or their home or whatever type of subdivision that they would like. For the area structure plans, bylaw 19-007 was just approved by County Council here this morning. We have the Aylman area structure plan, which is north of the city, and that's under review, and the airport area structure plan submitted by the city of Lethbridge, which is also currently under review. With intermunicipal relations, I won't go into the IDPs that we're working on, but just to note our relations with the town of Nobleford. We did have an amendment to that intermunicipal development plan recently, and that was approved by both County Council and by the town of Nobleford. So those changes have been made, and they will be put on the county's website and circulated to County Council, the final document, just so you can have that as an electronic copy. The town of Picture Butte did submit a notice of intention to annex lands east of the town. We will be meeting with them later in May to discuss what their proposal is, both internally, and then we'll be meeting with the committees just to discuss where we move forward on that particular letter that we received. So with that, that's in a very brief nutshell what has been happening in the Planning and Development Department so far this year. Pretty busy and not unmanageable at this point in time. I know Sarah's lots of phone calls, lots of inquiries, so that means that people are eager to get developments underway. So any questions of council on my report or anything else that comes up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a reminder remind us on the area, or remind me anyway, on the airport area structure plan. Is that just the airport grounds, or is it, sorry?
Yeah, so that area structure plan is for specifically the airport lands. It doesn't contain any other lands, so it's obviously, as you know, a large parcel. And they're looking at, out of the master plan that was recently done, I think that was finished in the fall of 2018. They just wanted to move forward on having an area structure plan to further show how they would expand, say, the taxiways, airside development, so more hangar development, and then also the non-airside development, so kind of some more commercial development. But to be honest, there's a lot of work that needs to be done at the airport to make any of those things actually happen, but the area structure plan is kind of the first phase to moving that forward. And they were working with WSP on that area structure plan. So it was the same organization who did the master plan, so it kind of just, it dovetailed together that they wanted to have that done at the same time. So we're still reviewing it from an administrative perspective, and so we'll be bringing that forward probably in June for first reading for council's consideration.
So that's kind of the city and the county kind of working on it or looking at it?
It's mostly the city.
Okay.
Yeah, it's their document, but we have to make sure that we're comfortable with what they're proposing. So in that regard, it is a bit of a collaboration.
Okay, thank you.
Just as a reminder, when are they planning to take the airport?
That's not that would be more of a corporate services question. I don't know when that actually is formally happening.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, officially they took over ownership last July, but I think they're aiming and striving to take over operations for July 1st of this year. Yeah.
Anybody else got a question? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to also say that, with Hillary, what she just mentioned about the conference and everything like that, was my second conference, but this year was much better than last year. I got way more than I thought too. We had the amount of people come there, and I just want to thank the planning board for all the work that's doing. So, congratulations.
I will forward that along to the board.
Anybody else?
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Chairman, I'll move the Planning and Development 2019 quarterly report.
All in favor?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is a carryover from the Agricultural Services Board meeting, the spring meeting that we had a few weeks ago. And we've appointed, or we'd like to appoint Aaron Bradley as a weed inspector for the county. Our numbers of weed inspectors, we have to keep a certain number of weed inspectors just to keep up with the workload that we have. So we have two right now. We appoint Aaron Bradley, and we're expecting another retirement later in the year that would bring us back to two, and at that time we'll make a determination of who would represent the third weed inspector appointed by council at that time. So right now, as recommended by the Agricultural Services Board, we're recommending that Aaron Bradley be appointed weed inspector for Lethbridge County.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I, like to move that we, appoint Aaron Bradley as our addition to the weed inspection group.
Any questions? All in favor? Very good, thank you.
I-1. Public hearing isn't scheduled.
I figure I should just stay here the whole day. Might make your life easier.
Enjoy there.
This is the Hamlet of Turin growth study. Pages 70 to 71.
And so there are copies of the draft Hamlet of Turin growth study in the front pocket of your agenda today. It is, I've been told that it's actually a pretty good read. You learn a little bit of history about our hamlets in these studies, which I find intriguing. I know that it's very interesting to know, you know, some people who have been around longer than others might know a bit more history than I do, but to really dive into these areas and find out kind of what their history is, why they started, how they've grown over the past 50, 60, 70 years. It's really good to have that history so that we can build moving into the future for the hamlets and really determine where future growth could happen, because really most of our hamlets have potential to grow, and so this will help build on that, and hopefully we'll be able to see some, you know, with these plans, some incremental growth that can support these communities and the surrounding agricultural areas. So the municipal budget that was approved in 2018 for the 2019 to 2021 budget years, the Hamlet studies were included as a budget item for planning and development, as they have been for a few years. But we are moving forward on that. So the Turin Hamlets growth study is the second one that we are bringing forward for council's review and hopefully by resolution approval. The first one was the Monarch growth study that was approved by county council last year. So the Turin growth study commenced in the fall of 2018 with the Oldman River Regional Services Commission contracted to draft the study, specifically Steve Hardy. The background information and historic data were compiled, as well as an assessment of the current condition of the existing hamlet dwellings, the sizing of lots, and available infrastructure. So if there's water, sewer, what's the capacity? And so it really is a holistic report in looking at public works side, roads, water, sewer, where can we grow, what are some of the restrictions that might be in the hamlet, or where are the opportunities. We sent out a survey to each of the hamlet landowners and got some feedback on the growth of the hamlet and the land uses that we recommended. 46 surveys were sent out and 14 landowners responded, resulting in 30% response rate. And I know that doesn't sound like a very high number, but that's a pretty good response rate for a survey. We sent out both a hard copy, and then people could also do it online. So we're trying to reach some different demographics with that. So 30%, it's pretty good for a very small community, especially where we know that a lot of the land that's owned in those communities, people don't actually live there. They're renting them out. So we thought that was pretty good. Residents and landowners in Turin stated they enjoyed the quietness of the area, good neighbors, open space, and that the hamlet provides. Some concerns were expressed for lack of garbage pickup, minimal snow removal, and lack of commercial services. So these comments, I mean, our public works department deals with the snow removal, and we have the recycling truck that goes around to each of our communities. So we'll take that when we're doing when we're looking at our future budgets, we can look at what's the need. Some people want a higher level of service than maybe what can be actually provided. But if the community grows, then things could maybe change. The lack of commercial services is something that the county as a municipality can't really do too much about that at this point in time. It's usually private enterprise that comes in to start up a business. There is the little general store there, which seems to, you know, it's been there for a long time and it's still there. So hopefully it does carry on. And we are looking at doing some industrial lots where the old CP station lands were. So hopefully that might generate some interest in future development along the Highway 25 area. One thing with these smaller hamlets is that we need to move a little bit forward, be a little bit more proactive in terms of creating the opportunities for development. So the rezonings, the subdivisions, those are things that administration and the county council, we can maybe try to get some momentum there. The Huron is a unique hamlet in that it does have both water and sewer service, which is a really big benefit to for that type of development to occur. We would have to look at capacities for those, depending on the type of industry that could potentially go there, but it is an opportunity that we can work with our economic development officer on maybe plugging out that area as an opportunity once we get those subdivisions finalized. The final growth study was completed in March of 2019 this year, and we did send another notice to the landowners, just notifying them that the plan was done and that it was available for them to review. We had a copy in the office here. We also had it located on the county's website. We did have some people come in and take a look at it, some interested residents. Some of them were a little bit concerned that we were going to take their land and develop it, and that's obviously not the case. We just provide the opportunity to say that this is a good location for, say, future residential or future industrial. And so once we explained that, I think it resonated with them, and they kind of accepted that, as far as I know, and as just an opportunity that they could have. They're not obligated to do anything. So the final growth study addresses the existing state of the hamlet with a focus on future growth. And on page, sorry, I'll just, it's on map 6 of the growth study. Sorry, I should have had it on the screen for you to see. But it's the one that shows where the future development will go. It's kind of after all the text, there's a few maps in there. But it shows where we anticipate some internal growth for residential, some internal growth for industrial, and then going outside of the hamlet boundaries, looking at where we can have both of those things going into the future. It is unfortunate that the school did close down in Turin a number of years ago before I came to the county, so that's, I mean, there's one in the new one in Iron Springs, so that's probably going to be helpful in that regard. But it's unfortunate that we don't have that particular amenity to offer people in Turin right now. So as I mentioned, we imagine that future growth would kind of go to east, south, and west, not going north of the highway. That would probably not work out very well. There are a number of feedlots around there too, so we want to make sure that we're keeping the hamlet contained to that south of the highway area. We also have the municipal services available to accommodate some infill for sure in terms of residential growth, and then possibly to accommodate external growth. But these plans are fairly long term in terms of growth. Our hamlets don't grow at a rapid pace, but we want to try to, like I said, be a little bit more proactive so that we can, if an opportunity comes up, that we're a little bit more ready on the ground to say, yep, we have some lands for residential, we have some lands for industrial development. So that's kind of the purpose. And Turin seems to be one of those that are almost pretty primed up to have something go there. We've had a few inquiries, so that's, I don't know why, but maybe the isolation is a benefit in that particular area for maybe a certain type of industry. But with that, I'm happy to take any comments or questions from council. Steve Hartley is also here. If I can't answer the question, he can probably do that. So, anything from council?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It looks like there's lots of room for infill, but as there been much demand recently with residential growth, or has there been much building, I guess, either?
Not particularly in Turin. There's, later on today, you'll see there's an application to put in a new house. But really, growth has been pretty stagnant. There is, right before I arrived with the county, there is a landowner did put up a few houses, a duplex there, and which is very nice. It's a nice property. So it's been limited, but I think as the agricultural industry around there does grow, and you're getting more people working on those, on the feedlots, perhaps we'll see more interest in building those hamlets, and so that's why we want to kind of have some land available for development. There is some zoned land that's in the hamlet, that has one landowner that, I hope to speak to just to see if he would want to pursue actually subdividing lots and just having them available, because occasionally we do get calls to say, are there any lots available in any of the hamlets in those more remote areas, because there's an interest to have housing closer to the work. So they're not growing rapidly, but you know, we want to be prepared.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I like that road study what was done down there. It does give some people that have interest in that area, that at least they have a document down there to show them, you know, what could be done and what the possibilities of expansion of that hamlet. So with that, I would like to move that we approve the or accept the hamlet of Turin road study, Mr. Chairman.
All those in favor?
Thanks.
11 o'clock. We'll recess the meeting and ask for a motion to go into public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Council. So this public hearing is for bylaw 19-011. It's for Harriet and Amelia Vandenberg, and it's to amend the land use bylaw from rural urban fringe to business light industrial for the southern portion of the southeast 21123 west of the port. And it would probably be helpful if you could see it on the map. So I will move over to Nobleford. I'm sure most of you are familiar with this particular location. It is the same site where Vandenberg Hay is currently located, and their equipment sales location. There we go. So Vandenbergs did come in. They wanted to be able to expand their existing equipment sales facility that they have on the parcel, which is this building right here. They would like to put a fairly significant addition onto the rear of this building to accommodate their growing business. Currently, the land use is under rural urban fringe, which doesn't permit the expansion of existing facilities to the scale that the Vandenbergs would wish. And in line with that intermunicipal development plan that we already have approved with the town of Nobleford for this particular location, these lands have been identified for future light industrial and commercial development because of the proximity to the highway, the rail, and so on and so forth. So that was approved in 2012, that particular IDP. And so in discussions with Mr. Vandenberg, we told him that the best opportunity for moving forward on their application would be to amend the southern portion of their parcel to business light industrial, and that would allow for the expansion of their existing business, and that would also allow for future development on their parcel, so they could then entertain subdivision and save if there was other interested parties in terms of development, they could move forward on that. So this is a very good, positive economic driver for this area. There's been a lot of interest on the town side to have more commercial development, not necessarily in the town, because they're getting a bit squeezed for space, but looking at development along the highway. So this aligns really well with the conversations we've had with the town, and it aligns with the IDP and the county's MDP. So we reviewed the proposed redesignation, and as I mentioned, it meets all the statutory planning documents, so the intermunicipal development plan and the municipal development plan that we have here at the county. And they do have suitable infrastructure in place for the development. It would not be a high water user, so they would use their existing service they have. There is no sewer system currently to this area, but once again, they would need to have an intensive septic system, so they could just use their existing, probably a holding tank is what they have there right now, or septic field. I'm pretty sure they just have a holding tank. Most equipment sales, rural ones have just a holding tank. And it exists compatible with the existing land uses. So all along the, and I think I have it in your agenda package also, there's a map that shows, yes, on page 39, that shows the extent of where we would anticipate future light industrial and business commercial type development. And it goes all the way along Highway 519 to Highway 23. So it's a fairly extensive area. So this fits in nicely as a phase 1 for this type of development. The application was circulated to the town of Nobleford and other external agencies. Comments were received from the town of Nobleford, Alberta Transportation, and the LNID. No concerns or objections were expressed with regards to the proposed rezoning application. The town of Nobleford was quite happy to see this application come in. They wanted them to do more, but there isn't really more to do in this particular instance. But it's good to have that support from our adjacent municipalities. The application was also advertised in the April 9th and 16th editions of the Sunny South News, and also sent to the adjacent landowners. No comments or concerns were submitted to the county at the time of this report. No comments were received after the report was submitted for the agenda. I think a lot of people, because the Vandenberg Hay is well established and they already have their business there, there's a lot of faith that they're a good business operator, that they're just going to be growing their community. So that's why I'm assuming there was not a lot of response back with regards to the notification. And they all kind of want to have more going on around that Nobleford area anyhow. So with that, administration would recommend that second and third reading of bylaw 19-011 be approved. Is there any questions of council with regards to my report?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's a great idea to take this step, but just a question on what triggered it now? What, as an extension, how come, like when they built the equipment dealer or dealership 3-4 years ago, how come it didn't get triggered then, or?
So the dealership, it is old, it predates the existing IDP actually. The Hay part has expanded incrementally over time, but the Hay part fit into the rural urban fringe district where the equipment sales it's more obviously business light industrial. It was built before I came to the county, so probably about 6 or 7 years ago. So it kind of got grandfathered in as that use at that time. And then as we did the IDP with the town of Nobleford, and then also did some of the revisions to the land use bylaw. So it was grandfathered, it was fine the way it was. And we told them once you do the expansion, then if that's what triggers the rezoning application, which I say is it's in their favor to do it because it allows them more opportunities for different types of development.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else with questions? The meeting for all of the people that are making presentations, please direct them to the chair. so, anybody wishing to submit, or the person submitting the land use bylaw amendment, do you have any presentation with that? Other people in support, the other people that are in support of the, okay, those persons submitting agree opposed to the adoption of the amendment, Call for a second time for anybody opposed to the amendment. Call for a third time. Anybody opposed to the amendment? Seeing none. Those in favor of the amendment? Calling for a second time for those in favor of the amendment. All those in favor of the amendment for the third time? Seeing none? Is there anyone wishing to be heard? First time. Anybody wishing to be heard? With this, Morris, go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, we go by there quite often, you know, the development down there, and we go actually quite a bit into Noblefort too, because there's such nice people over there. But anyways, every time I go by there to go onto Highway 23 or to what's going on Highway 2 down there, you know, I'm just tickled to see the activity, what's going on down there, and it is good for the county, but it's also good for the Noblefort. So I'm really happy to see what's going on there.
Anybody else wishing to make a statement? Seeing none? Council, have any questions?
Mr. Chairman, I move to close the public hearing.
All in favor?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would move second reading of bylaw 19-011.
All those in favor? Carried. All those in favor?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Council. So on March 25th, Lethbridge County received an application to move previously occupied mobile home, manufactured home, to a parcel in turn. And the parcel is this one as illustrated here. The mobile home dates from 2001, measures approximately 16 feet by 77 feet in size and has a 12 by 12 deck addition. The mobile home is currently located in the county, just northeast of Turn. The application was circulated on March 27th, and it was circulated to internal county departments, as well as by mail to adjacent landowners. One phone call was received from one of the adjacent landowners who expressed several concerns with the application. And these concerns are as follows. They felt that adding another mobile home to the neighborhood will continue to decrease the property values. This person was concerned about the mobile home not meeting the building code, which could potentially cause a fire hazard in their eyes. Third one was they were concerned about the property becoming a junkyard and filling up with garbage. And the fourth concern was that the property would be using the existing alleyway in the rear here to park vehicles to access the property rather than accessing the property from the street. The adjacent landowner was not opposed to there being a residence on the property, they were just opposed to it being a used manufactured home. The adjacent landowner requested that if council approves this application, that two conditions would be placed on the development permit. First off, that a proper driveway or access be installed from the county road, so from Main Street there, and that the manufactured home be required to comply with all necessary building codes. So the parcel currently contains an older Quonset structure, and which the owner and applicant of this permit currently uses for storage. The parcel is located within the Hamlet Direct Control District, and under the Hamlet Direct Control District, other uses considered suitable by council is listed as a permitted use. So how you want to define that, the other uses as considered suitable by council, is entirely up to you. Historically, the Hamlet Direct Control parcels were used to regulate commercial industrial activities in the hamlets. But as you'll see, if we can zoom out on the aerial photo here, this particular parcel is pretty much almost entirely surrounded by other dwellings, other residential dwellings. And County Council, as we had in the last meeting, is the development authority for development permit applications that are made in the Hamlet Direct Control District. County Council has the opportunity to either refuse this development permit application, you may approve it, you can also approve it and make amendments to the listed conditions on the proposed development permit. There would be little to no changes in the tax assessment if in the county overall, if this manufactured home were to either remain on its current location or to be removed or to be relocated to this new location. Like the taxes would remain the same. Administration is recommending that this development permit application be approved with conditions. Because the parcel is almost entirely surrounded by existing residential dwellings, and the use of the property for residential purposes would therefore be compatible with the adjacent residential use. The manufactured home meets the criteria as outlined in the land use bylaw and appears to be in good condition on the exterior. So, included in your package there should be the draft of the development permit application. And please tell me that, and if County Council has any questions, please let me know.
Thank you. Any questions?
Well, Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, we just went through that draft growth study up here, and I cannot believe it, and it's happening already.
Yeah, it's magic.
But anyways, yeah, I can see some of the comments was made down there, but I look at it, you know, well, it might be a mobile home there now, but in the future down there, maybe that's gonna be replaced by a house. You know, so unless anybody else has something else to bring up, but other than that, I would like to move this proposal.
All in favor?
Thanks, Aaron.
Thanks, sir.
Yeah, thanks.
Pretty soon, she's gonna be the one who's up here all the time.
Where are you?
No, I'm not going. Yeah, I'm just gonna grab my information. Is council okay with me proceeding with the intermunicipal development plan proposal?
What page you want that on?
Page 77 of the agenda. So this is just a very brief report to County Council on the draft Lethbridge County, Vulcan County Intermunicipal Development Plan. So similar to the one that we did for the MD of Willow Creek, this is just the next municipality that I was able to complete a draft for. We wanted to, as per the conversation we had with County Council in December of last year, in moving forward with all of our rural-to-rural intermunicipal development plans, we wanted to present a draft plan prior to moving and proceeding with the open house. So you'll notice that in the draft, it's pretty dressed down. There's nothing pretty flashy about it. I will make it prettier. But it just contains the basic policy structure, which you would find similar to any of the other rural-to-rural IDPs that we are working on. And it includes the maps in the back of the document. So you can see the area that we're looking at. It's a mile on both sides of the municipal boundary. And it looks at things like existing land use, it looks at environmentally sensitive areas, historical resource areas, existing confined feeding operations, exclusion areas. Both Vulcan County and Lethbridge County both have confined feeding operation exclusion areas within their municipal development plans. So that's identified in one of the maps. So it's a fairly general plan, but it does cover off the requirements as per the Municipal Government Act. The county or Vulcan County municipal staff have reviewed the document and have there's a few minor tweaks to the document, and also their planner from the Old Mount River Regional Services Commission took a look at it. That's Ryan Dick, and just had a couple of minor changes to make just to ensure it was compatible with what their existing documents were. So those were made, and so we're presenting you the draft today in order to proceed with the open house, which we hope to do at the end of May, pending any scheduling conflicts. So if there's any questions from council at this point in time, this is just to move forward with the open house and public consultation piece for this plan. We would bring it back for first reading at a later date. Any questions in council?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Less as it pertains to this particular IDP and more just in general terms, Hillary. Speaking with your colleagues in other municipalities and maybe throughout the province, could you just maybe say generally, are you comfortable with where we're at in our IDP process, and I guess how we've been moving forward to this point? Are you comfortable with how the process has evolved and where we sit trying to get these all buttoned down?
I think the process has actually worked out really well in terms of the urban and the ones that we've done for the urban and rurals they're more intense. There's more considerations. So those ones, so that process has taken more time, and it needs more time because you need to have more conversations between the councils to determine what's the best use around those fringe areas. With the rural to rurals, you know, they seem a bit redundant because we're just putting into words what we already practice in terms of working with our rural neighbors. But at the same time, it's been really helpful. I actually have better communication now with my counterparts in those municipalities. So, you know, just touching base, and so I'm getting better connections that way. It does open the lines of communication, having a more formalized document in place and approved, so that you're not just kind of the one-offs. It's more on a consistent basis that we're, you know, talking about, oh, well, you know, say in the Vulcan County instance, we have the Little Bow that runs through the kind of the northeastern portion of the plan area. And so now we can have that conversation on, well, you know, we want to make sure we don't have, we want to make sure we're protecting that area, and that development isn't going to encroach and negatively impact that area. And so now we have a consideration on both sides instead of it just being more of a one-sided story. Same with the expansion of, say, a feedlot, even though that's the Natural Resources Conservation Board's responsibility. Now we have another, I know that I have a contact across the board that I can talk to about, oh, you know, we noticed that this is happening, do you have any consideration? So it definitely gives us the mechanisms for a better referral process, better timelines to follow, and that we're all on the same page. And having these rural to rural IDPs being fairly similar, we know all have their nuances where they're slightly different, but it really kind of makes sure that, you know, with Sarah's issuing a development permit or I'm working on a rezoning, that we have the same set of information to follow, and they have that same information, and they know who to contact at the county. So I think overall there's been a positive response. I've had a positive response with our adjacent neighbors, and in the province, I think there's been, you know, there may have been a few people who are maybe not as convinced that it was necessary, but a lot of people realize that, you know, at the end of the day, these documents they don't have to be beefy and complicated. They can be fairly simple and to the point, but they have some value added to them, so I'm good.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to follow up to that, Hillary, the previous provincial government stressed the importance of, like you said, collaboration, working together. I know it's premature, but moving forward, do you see that that same spirit moving forward with the ICS, the IDPs, and I guess to what you said, it opens those lines and stuff. Do you see that continuing going forward, or is there any concerns on your part that path might be altered?
With the intermunicipal development plans, I don't believe that there would be a change. The legislation that was done for IDPs was actually done under the Progressive Conservative Party previous to the NDP. So I don't think that's going to change. Like the South Saskatchewan Regional Plan was started on the former, the previous government. So I don't think those will change necessarily. The ICFs were maybe, that's where there could be some change. We're not entirely sure. But I guess from this point, we're just, with the rural ones, there's nothing, like Larry and Ann have been working on those specifically. I don't think that there's anything that's terribly contentious about doing them. It just kind of, once again, opens the line of communication. Like for the MG Little Creek, we had a service agreement for Moon River Estates that we want to, you know, like just to formalize that we have that agreement in place and that we're going to keep that relationship open. In Vulcan County, we don't really have anything, but at the same time, it doesn't mean that something couldn't come up at some point in the future. Maybe they have, you know, a water line that could be extended. Who knows? So I think the ICFs might be slightly more in question, but the IDPs, I think, we're pretty solid moving forward with these and improving them.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, when we started this, I was kind of reluctant to accepted that where we need this balloon before, but I think, you know, it actually has some good merit because I think, Mr. Chairman, I think we became more aware of each other, what maybe our intention is from each other's municipality and maybe even our own, you know, towards the other municipalities. So I think that it was a good thing, but I didn't start out that way.
I may not be here.
Steve?
Yeah, just further to that, what Hillary said, I think, I was just at a IDP meeting yesterday with Crow's Nest Pass and Indian Ranch lands. And 75% of their land on the border is all Crown land, so it's no real issue. It's mostly the provincial, the province doesn't need permits for things, whatever. But just by doing the plan together, what they said yesterday, as we go through the final draft, was that the main thing for the two of them too was a way to communicate and talk, and just with the referral policies in there, it just, as Hillary said, it kind of puts into practice on paper some of the formalities of already communicating and sharing information. But just by having the referral policies in there saying we'll share information with you, or if we get an application or something from the government, we'll share that with you. It's just that formalizes that communication between the two. So those two as well said, even though this doesn't really affect us that much because it's 75% Crown land, if anything, it's made us communicate better, and in the future we'll be able to communicate. One of the other things I was going to add though is that I know that the county's probably aware, but a few of the other rules out there weren't aware that the previous provincial government had put a bulletin out that on rural to rurals, you do have until May of 2021, you have an extra year to do the rural to rurals. The urban rurals, it's May of 2020, but they had granted an extension on the rural to rurals, so that is to May to 2021. So your timeline here, you move along, so it's probably good. But a number of rurals out there didn't know or had missed that bulletin, and weren't actually aware that the rural rurals actually have the extra year on them. So just want to share that.
We don't like to wait till the last minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And further to what our colleagues here have said about the intermunicipal development plans, the IDPs, with respect to the ICFs or the intermunicipal collaboration frameworks, we're well along that path too. I know there was some speculation that, you know, if the government changed in Alberta, which it recently did, as we're all aware, you know, maybe it wouldn't become a requirement. But further to what Mr. Hardy said there, you know, we're proceeding full speed ahead. We've already completed one rural to rural ICF with the municipal district of Tabor. We're well along that path with the municipal district of Willow Creek, and we, you know, again are proceeding kind of full speed ahead with not only the rural to rural ICFs, but also the rural Lethbridge County, that is, to our urban partners, and everybody seems to be on board. There seems to be momentum, and indeed it does present a good platform for enhancing communications and understanding with each other. So full speed ahead, you know, at this time on that. So, thank you.
Anybody else got a comment or question? If not, would somebody care to make a motion? Okay, Corey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would move that the County Council direct administration to move forward with the IDP and the open house.
All in favor? Carried.
You leaving us now?
For a minute.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of council. I'm just here to present a relatively brief update report to you on the whole high-speed internet broadband situation. As you are aware, last summer of 2018, we did a business retention and expansion survey in Lethbridge County, and among the top issues identified by our business community was the need for better and higher speed internet capacity. And since that time, I've been working with other members of the administration staff, meeting with telecom providers, large and small, attending meetings, and we have made some significant progress, including starting to get numbers as to what this might cost and what the options might be. So the good news is that it looks like we will have some attractive options to pursue, in large measure driven, I think, in the private sector. There may be opportunities for the county to invest as a public partner, because what ultimately, to cover Lethbridge County in a way that would make sense, we will probably need some kind of fiber optic backbone, and then use wireless internet technology to cover the large expanses, especially north of Highway 3 and north of the Old Van River. The good news is technology is improving rapidly in these areas, and this is something that's not kind of pie in the sky or science fiction in the realm of science fiction. This is something that is actually achievable, and probably achievable at a reasonable cost, and something that could also be phased in. So at this stage, we're not quite yet ready with actual numbers and options, but we just wanted to let council know, because this has been an issue, this was also discussed at the strategic planning sessions in January, that work is progressing. It's progressing now kind of to an end stage where we will be able to come to council and actually provide real scenarios, real numbers, and leave it to council for consideration. So I'll maybe end on that, Mr. Chairman, but certainly would be open to questions.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. From the business survey last year, high-speed internet was a big kind of problem of the businesses. Are the businesses that responded, are they kind of scattered around, or are they in a certain area that can be serviced easier? Or?
Mr. Chairman, through to Councillor Campbell, that's a very good question. In Lethbridge County, we do have our clusters of businesses around the business parks and around the highways. And some of them can be serviced a little bit more easily. Recently, about 2 weeks ago, I met with one of our large telecom providers that services the Highway 3 corridor, and they mentioned that, you know, with even some minor equipment changes and updates, they'd be able to increase capacity on that line substantially. So I'm just following up on that. With other areas, you know, a little bit further away from the business parks, more into the rural agricultural areas, it's going to be a little bit more involved to do that. But the short answer is, in some areas, we will be able to see improvements in service without, you know, needing to do massive investments, just because of upgrades in technology.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question that I had for you: are we aware of any businesses or whatever that didn't come to the county because of lack of the broadband that we have?
Mr. Chairman, through to Councillor Vanderveen, no one business has of yet come to me or given me follow-up that they would specifically not come to the county or chose not to locate in Lethbridge County because of a lack of internet. But it becomes another factor in decision-making. I know that for the case of the DuPont Pioneer, now Corteva AgriScience corn research facility along Highway 3, where they chose to locate, a huge factor for them was being close enough to the high-speed internet, because they're transmitting so much data back to Ontario and then receiving it back. But that was a key in their site selection process. There were other factors that were involved as well. And again, with every business, you know, there's a whole laundry list of factors that they're looking at. But I think what we'll see, especially in the years to come, is if we are behind on high-speed internet accessibility, that will become a bigger and bigger factor in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Martin, a question I have for you is, there's a business straight north of me and close to Torrey as well, that decided to go out and pay the money to TELUS to bring high-speed internet via fiber optics directly to their place of business. Now, the unfortunate part of it is, it's fairly expensive, but it also is, it's only a rental facility they have. So, I'm concerned that if we don't have some kind of movement pretty quick, these people are gonna start, you know, we can go out to places that have this service and we don't need to lose any more business. So, what can we do to get this going faster?
Mr. Chairman, through to Reid Hickey, that's an excellent question and a very real point of concern. And the options that we're gonna be bringing forward to council very soon, within the next couple of months, I would expect, will provide some options, I guess, as to what the county could do to, you know, A, speed up the process, and B, maybe make it sustainable over the long term. Part of it will be, part of the consideration will be, is do we want to leave, you know, internet provision, broadband provision entirely in the hands of the private sector, in which case the market will dictate what businesses will pay. But we have to keep in mind, certainly, you know, a large business will provide the service, but if it's, you know, into a rural area, they may provide it at a very high cost. Not all businesses may be able to afford it. We may be able to take ownership of some of the infrastructure of that and be able to then kind of guarantee on a revenue generating model for ourselves, faster levels of service and greater capacity than probably a larger telco might be able to, and then work with them though as partners to get internet service out into the more remote areas. So what potentially could make a lot of sense for the county is to have kind of a framework where we are providing some broadband kind of backbone that then we can partner with the private sector to provide wireless service. But we would be generating, we would have control over our internet provision, and we would be able to generate some revenue off of it as well. A long answer to, I know, a fairly straightforward question, but those are the kinds of options that we will be presenting within the next month or two.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To Martin, you know, like, that makes me think of, you know, like the businesses we have down there at the Broxburn Industrial Development down there, and there's some pretty good businesses down there. So what was there from before the radio, or is that been enhanced over the last few years?
Mr. Chairman, through to Councillor Zeenstra, there is already certain amount of internet backbone in the county. The large telcos like your TELUS's, your Bells, and so forth have invested in this area. Part of it is because they have networks that stretch, let's say, from Lethbridge to Medicine Hat, and they've laid fiber optic cable between those two municipalities, and so you can tie in off of them, and that's kind of what there has been there. In the past, maybe even up to 5 years ago, people weren't using the capacity of internet they have now. You might think of your own homes, whether it's children or grandchildren, things like Netflix, things like online gaming, that 5-10 years ago weren't really issues. Now, a lot of homes, that's kind of standard. And I just give that as an example of just how things have changed in the last 5 or 10 years. So I think some of our businesses, up until very recently, not having perhaps the high-speed internet wasn't such a big factor for them. It just wasn't a need the way it is today. But what we're starting to see, especially over the last few years, even in the agricultural sector, maybe I should say especially in the agricultural sector, is almost a revolution where big data, sensors, drones, robotization is starting to come in a big way, and there's that need for the extra capacity. So there is existing capacity in places like Broxburn and along that corridor. The problem is, or the challenge is, that the need and the usage is skyrocketing in that area, and the existing capacity won't be enough in the future. In fact, already in some cases isn't enough, and the problem is just going to get more acute. It's not going to go away by itself.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Some of our businesses along the busy corridors, like the Broxburn, where their fiber optic is close, are they connected directly, or is it wireless for them?
Mr. Chairman, through to Councillor Campbell, S. Campbell. That's a good question, and it's hard for me to kind of give you a blanket statement. I know that the lines, and in my research, the work I've been doing on this, the lines that run along Highway 3 run on the north side of the highway. And so probably the tie-in in those cases is primarily wireless for the businesses south of the highway. Some of the businesses have spoken about the possibility of drilling under the highway to tap in directly. And that all wireless actually eventually has to tap into a physical line, and that's what is the conduit. And kind of Southern Alberta's gateway to the world, as far as the World Wide Web, is Calgary. So really what happens is from these wireless towers, the signal goes to a point where it goes into the fiber line, that gets conducted through the fiber to Calgary, and from Calgary there it gets sent around the world to where it needs to go. So more specifically to Broxburn, I would venture to guess most of those are connected wirelessly at the moment. If we were to get a hard line were to be run under the highway to those, they would get faster speed and more reliable service.
So you had mentioned one like DuPont down the highway, then on the north side, and they would be directly.
There, I'm almost 100% positive they are directly tied in. That would have been a big part of the investment in that facility, just because of the volume of data is so high.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So what you're saying is that the city of Lethbridge does not have enough data, or whatever you want to call it, to be able to tie in around the world, like you said Calgary would?
Mr. Chairman, through to Councillor Vanderveen, I don't think it's really a question of capacity. It's more a connection of an issue of architecture, for lack of a better word. Think of the airline industry. Right now, the major hub, or the two major hubs in Alberta are Calgary and Edmonton. International flights come into them, and then you get on the smaller planes to come to Lethbridge or to go to Red Deer and everything. And I believe that's how the architecture has been set up for how the web runs. And so Calgary would have the big servers, and I will confess, this kind of goes beyond my area of expertise. Our IT manager, Doug Burke, can probably explain it better than I can. But that is kind of where the big servers are designed to send the signals out around the world are clustered in Calgary, not in Lethbridge. It's just the way the architecture is.
Anybody else? Fiber optics. Across from my driveway, there's a huge pipeline with fiber optics in it going to Calgary. So that's the north side of the river.
Mr. Chairman, to respond to that, yes, because there would be, because again, everything from Lethbridge and the area will head eventually north, has to head to Calgary. One of the proposals that we have that I think has quite a bit of promise is that there's an existing band of fiber optics that runs in a loop from Calgary through to Medicine Hat, through to Lethbridge, back up to Calgary. And this is currently not being utilized. It's dark. And there is a proposal that perhaps we could tap into that and lease it and have control over it for 20 years, and then have that capacity available for ourselves and other municipalities. And then we could work with the telcos like Intellis or some of the other smaller ones to say, okay, working with this, you can then, you know, put up your towers and provide wireless to the rural customers. So back to your question, or your statement, Mr. Chairman, yes, there is fiber existing, fiber networks existing. The problem is they don't cover enough and we don't have access to all of them.
But you don't want to access one across the road, because it's going to be really tough to fix.
Potentially, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So who owns that fiber optic, the black lines that you're talking about?
The dark fiber lines, Mr. Chairman, through the Councillor Vanderveen, the dark fiber lines there is owned by a company called Zayo, and it was originally put in a number of years ago for a different purpose, a project that didn't wind up coming to fruition. A lot of the capacity, or a lot of the cost associated with putting in fiber optic lines is the actual putting it into the ground. And so the fact that it's kind of lying there dormant, shall we say, is kind of an unused or underutilized resource. One of the things that we will be presenting to council for consideration is the prospect of potentially in the future around Lethbridge County, whenever trenching work or excavation work is being done, taking the time while we're doing that to lay fiber optic cable, which would really be negligible overall in terms of the cost of the project, but then it's there to be added to the network at a suitable time. But that, I'm just providing that as a by-the-by. We'll be presenting that in more detail in the future.
Anybody else? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of council, for your questions.
You know, I'm not much into that technology, but it sounds like to me, you know, some businesses, they really depend on it. So should the motion read maybe that if any which way the county could help to speed things up, that you should encourage to do so?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I might be able to provide some support to what Councillor Zeenstra states. And recently, I've really noticed a major uptake in the activity, number of meetings, frequency of meetings, and number of players at the table. A few of our staff have been out to Tabor, out to Brooks, and so on. We had a meeting here last week with an internet provider, expert, if you will, consultant. And there seems to be a lot of momentum moving forward, and I suspect, you know, regardless of whatever motion council may choose to make today, though, but within, I think Martin mentioned it as well, within a month or two here, we should be able to come forward with, you know, some distinct questions or requests of council that would really help to move this to the next level. But there's definitely lots of momentum and kind of excitement happening now, I think, with respect to this matter, which is kind of just maybe sat on the back burner, maybe, if you will, for the past few years, but I think, again, wants momentum. And one other thing as well, that's the fellow who gave the little workshop or presentation to a few of us last week, he stressed, and I think it's becoming more and more accepted broadly, and that is that we need to think of broadband connection in the world similar to the way we think of roads and sewer and water as being essential utility services for business and, you know, for life in general. So there is a recognition of that, or an increasing recognition. And again, I think very soon we'll have a report to council asking for some specifics and presenting some options for council to really move this up a notch and take it to the next level. And part of that will, you know, likely have a financial aspect to it, a component. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thought Steve was in the middle of starting to make a motion, so I think Steve is a very knowledgeable person when it comes to that type of the technology, and I would like Councilor Steve Campbell to make that motion. Is that okay with you, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, thank you.
Is that okay with Councilor Steve Campbell?
Yes, quite all right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wouldn't say I was in the middle of it, but I was going to start. Just that council accepts item I4, broadband internet for Lethbridge County, update for information, and continues to support administrative work in assessing broadband needs and network options for Lethbridge County.
All those in favor? Carried.
Since it's 12 o'clock, Mr. Chairman, I move we adjourn for lunch.
All in favor?
1-4, Corey Woodward and Jacqueline Woodward, and it is pages 44 to 58.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This subdivision application is located just south of Park Lake on Park Lake Road, or otherwise known as Range Road 22-3. This parcel was recently redesignated to Group Country Residential to allow for the split of the parcel. And so it was redesignated from rural agriculture to Group Country Residential, that is, under bylaw 18-032. So they are coming forward as planned to subdivide the 5-acre parcel into 2 titles. A little, not quite split in half, but 2.89 acres and 2.11 acres, respectively in size. And Steve will go through the recommendation and the planning comments. If you want to see the layout for their proposed subdivision, it's on pages 55 and 56 of your agenda package.
Mr. Chair, as mentioned, this is an application to resplit an existing 5-acre lot into 2 titles, which should end up being 2.89 and 2.11 acres respectively. As Hillary mentioned, this was an application for the land use for as part of the rezoning application to Group Country Residential. And there was a conceptual design scheme plan that was prepared at that time in conjunction with the rezoning, which this application then is submitted in respect of. The parcel, as you can see on the photo there, the existing main yard sits on the southern portion of that lot, so they will be splitting it. As you can see on the diagram, it's not like a straight rectangular type of shape. They're following kind of the driveway there and the trees around the existing house, and then putting the line back to the east there, so it's not like a straight line split. And that'll allow the acres in each parcel to exceed the 2-acre minimum and have room for the septic field and that sort of thing. You may or may not recall that as part of the rezoning process and that conceptual plan, design scheme plan that was done, the soils were looked at for septic. There's a septic analysis was done, and that was all good, and that was submitted at that time. So the 2 lots, they meet the requirements for Group Country Residential zoning. They exceed the 2-acre minimum for that. Both lots will take access off the west municipal road there, fronting the lots. The existing lot and the new lot will have the North County Potable Water Co-op for water. The existing septic field will remain with the parcel to the south, and as mentioned, the soils are suitable for a new septic field to go on the north side of the tiny dwelling site constructed with that. As well as part of the application, there's no abandoned gas wells in the area or CFOs where any MDS would be infringed upon. The MDS was also looked at the rezoning stage, which helped with the rezoning to Group Country Residential because it met all the requirements at that time. So with that, it does conform to the county subdivision criteria, land use bylaw for the Group Country Residential designation on the land. During the circulation here, we had no objections or concerns submitted by anybody. Since the agenda packet went out to you. I didn't have all the utility comments back at that time. So since the package, we do have comments from Fortis, ATCO Pipelines, and the Northern Irrigation District. None of them require anything, no easements or anything like that are required. So with that, with it conforming to the subdivision criteria in the Group Country Residential Land Use District, there's no objection. I've recommended an approval to you. I will note that municipal reserve has been previously paid on this, so it's not applicable approval at this one. So the conditions would be the payment of any outstanding property taxes, the development agreement entered into with the county, the final subdivision plan prepared by the surveyor, and on the draft that you have in front of you, it had forthcoming easements required by utility companies, but it looks like nothing we needed in that regard. So with that and those conditions, I have a resolution in front of you for recommendation.
Any questions, Steve or Hilbert? Go ahead, Klaus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That used to be the old place of Susie's Greenhouse.
No,
Oh,
that's further to the south.
Any other questions? Steve, so where does block, or lot number 9 get its legal access from? Are they sharing that access, or are they, how do they, that put a new one in, or what?
Yeah, they'll put in a new access, which they'll get a approach permit from the Public Works Department. Make sure that it conforms to the culvert sizing and the driveway sizing.
And that 2.11 acres, is that, I know that 2 acres is our minimum size, but is there any way we could get just a little bit more, or is it gonna be sufficient to work? Or is that the one that already has existing septic, right?
Yeah, the smaller one has the existing septic already, so the 2.11 should be, is sufficient to cover all of that.
Any other questions? Seeing none, we could use a motion to approve if you're in that favor. Bob?
Yes, I'll move the application 019-0-014 approved.
Okay.
Hi, Chris Sarah.
Any further discussion? Call for the question? Those in favor? Those opposed? Carried.
You can go home now, Nick.
Next is subdivision application 2019-0-040, Van Bezoyan Farms Limited. It is pages 59 to 67.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this last subdivision for today is to take the first parcel out of an existing quarter section. It would be a 2-acre first parcel out of a 54.58-acre title. This application does meet all the criteria for a subdivision as per the land use bylaw. And if you want to see the location of the subdivision, it's on page 66 and 67 of your agenda package. Steve will go through the comments and the recommendation.
And Mr. Chair, this application as described is the first parcel out of the quarter section. It's for the existing older farmyard, which will be a 2-acre in size. There's an existing small yard there with a dwelling, garage, tree shelter belt and such. This yard gets the water from the water co-op, and we have a private on-site sewage treatment field system. It is noted, you see the diagram there, because it is a older, small yard, tree shelter belts. We will be taking a little bit of extra land on the east side to include the yard in order to make the 2-acre minimum parcel size of the land bylaw. In the future, if that older, currently about a 25 or 30-year-old septic field there, if they would ever need to replace that or something, if they have sufficient room there to do that. As part of the review, we looked at the proximity to their own dairy operation there. The landowners have a permit for a CFO there for 175 head dairy. So in the discussions with the NRCB and looking at the MDS to this, it does meet, well, it does meet the MDS to their own barns, and so they're good on that. It would typically meet the MDS to a area that they use for heifer breeding. So right here, where the mouse is a heifer breeding pen. So if the MDS was applied to that, it wouldn't meet it. It'd be a little bit deficient. But the heifer breeding pen is only used occasionally at breeding time. So there's not animals fully contained in there all year. And the applicants are also going to, in the next year or so, actually remove that. They're going to a full insemination program, and they won't be utilizing the heifer breeding pen anymore in the future. Regardless of that, even if that was the issue, it does meet the bylaw with the exemption on the MDS, because this yard with this house was in place prior to the MDS bylaw coming into effect and was there first. So as part of the circulation on this one, there was no objections or concerns received on the application. None of the utility companies to this point require anything. I haven't heard back as of today from all the utility companies. If on approving it here, there's a condition, the blanket condition for utility easements. So I would just leave that on there in case something is needed to capture that. But it does meet the criteria as a first parcel subdivision, approving at 2 acre size. And I've recommended on that basis approval to you with the conditions of taxes being paid up to date, development agreement entered if required, the surveyor sketch there, and then just the blanket utility easement if anything subsequently is required on that.
Any questions, Steve or Hillary?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since they plan on removing that pen in the near future, would it be appropriate, excuse me, would it be appropriate to make that a condition of subdivision? So we've kind of done that before on more bigger infrastructure like barns and stuff though.
Yeah, if the approval was dependent on a waiver being granted to that, I would say yes, I would put it out there. But the reason I didn't is because they do comply with the other part of the policy that says that the dwelling was there first before they're exempt from the MDS. So on that basis, it kind of seems that it's not needed because they're in compliance with that part of the policy. As well, they're hoping in the next year, but they didn't know the exact date. And in talking to Karina at the NRCB too, if at that time when they do that, the NRCB will require them to formally make application to them and decommission that part. And then they'll notify the county that that's been applied for and done or whatever like that. So the county will be notified at that time, whatever. So.
Any other questions? So Steve, for the minimum distance to apply, does it have to be a permanent type use thing? Or like this is occasionally used?
Yeah,
How does that work, kinda?
Yeah, and if you read the OPA and the discussions with the NRCB, the language is specific that applies to areas where there's confinement of animals. So the barns, the corrals, those types of things, the manure lagoons where you compost, so it's very specific on that. The NRCB said that their language is not clear on whether a breeding facility falls under the legislation or not, because it is not full yearly confinement. So they said that if the applicant made the argument if it was used for 6 months or a year or less, which as a green facility would be, that then as the 6 months or less seasonal use, or if that, the OPA doesn't apply. So typically, I guess it depends in the end of how much you use it and how long the animals are in there and that sort of thing, so.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, do we have a motion for approval or approval? Pause. We're making a motion to approve subdivision application 2019-0-040 Vanpoint Oil Farms Limited. Okay. Any further discussion? Call for the question. Those in favor? Those opposed? Carried.
I know.
What side do you want? Hey.
Okay. We're on item J, corporate services. Bylaw 19-016, 2019 tax mill rate.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Myself and Les Westfield, our county assessor, are going to just go through a quick PowerPoint with you, which is basically going to summarize everything that's in the report for us today. So pursuant to section 353 of the Municipal Government Act, each council must pass a property tax bylaw annually. That tax bylaw must list separately the different assessment classes, which we have 4. Farmland, residential, non-residential, and machinery and equipment. The last 2 rates must be the same rate as each other. As you know, the 2019 operating budget was approved in January for just over $15 million, a difference of $153,000 from the previous year. We did have some changes in assessment, a slight decrease in farmland, and some rather large increases in residential and non-residential, so we're just over $50 million, which has helped keep our rates down, because we did forecast for about $30 million in growth in inflation. It came in at 50, so if Les, do you have anything to add to that, or if you have any questions on the assessment, on the changes, Les can answer them for you?
Yep, so basically the increase in assessment on the residential, we're looking at about $20 million in new growth and another 11 million roughly in inflation. So, and on the non-residential, we had 12 million more or less in growth and 7 million in inflation. There were some changes in the linear property assessments taking over the gas wells, oil wells, the land values, and railroad assessments that led to that.
Okay. The 2019 capital budget, and a lot of this is just for informational purposes. You'll recall that the Our Future program was $2 million. We did pass the business tax rate bylaw, and the most applicable tax rate is the business unit animal unit tax rate of $250 that was approved in April by council, bringing in the bulk of the business tax revenues. On this bylaw is the haul route network levy, which is coming in at 3.3019 per $1,000 of assessment, and that is the farmland, additional farmland levy to collect that $500,000, and then we anticipate a cap levy at 25 cents per ton to come in around $100,000. Last year we did have only $26,000 in business tax adjustments, which was great. That was pretty the lowest year since inception. And our cap levy came in at 182 last year. The 2019 tax rates have been set to closely maintain council's philosophy of a 2-to-1 ratio for commercial versus residential. And the business tax rate, which was was set at $250 per animal unit, and no other changes in any of the other business tax rates in the bylaw, and that maintains the 70-30 ratio between business tax and the farmland cap levy for the haul road network. And these are the proposed tax rates for 2019 in this shaded blue column over here. So for farmland is basically, it's pretty much the same. It's a 0.03% increase. Same with for the haul route network. There's a decrease in residential of 1.29 and a decrease in non-residential of 1.41. And that's on the municipal portion of the tax rates. For requisitions down below, regional waste does have an 8% increase. Although it sounds big, the actual increase was, I think, $25,000 in their requisition. So it's not huge, but Green Acres had a decrease. Education on residential and farmland had a decrease as well, but it had a larger increase on non-residential commercial type properties. But last year, they had quite a big decrease in educational on the non-res side.
Yes, and that was due to the over-under levy from the year prior to that, where they had again, the government had done some changes and didn't pull. There was a year or 2 years before it actually hit the live assessment and the education requisition. So that was all with provincial government and basically the Grattan Blue Department.
So down here on the second half of the requisitions, those are ones that are out of our control. They're beyond our control. They're set by the province or another requisitioning body. The designated industrial property rate went up quite significantly this year. Still, the only amount that we're collecting is 20-some thousand less?
Yeah, 27,000. That's their fee for assessing the linear properties and industrial properties.
Yeah, so even though it seems like a significant increase in the tax rate, for our municipality, it's really not that significant dollar-wise.
It's a universal amount tax rate throughout the province too. So.
Yeah. We do have some samples here. So again, in the blue column is the current rate. This is the 2018 rate. So you'll see farmland is basically unchanged from the year before. Some very small annual, these are annual amounts. These are annual decreases in all of these, residential and non-residential. And then on the requisitioning bodies, I mean, basically overall you're looking at very little change from the prior year, except for with the commercial, with the non-resident, the education tax, which is, you know, on a $750,000 property, it's $275 more annually. Any questions on that?
So how much of a role does every 4 years you get assessed, right, for like residential use? So how much difference, is there quite an increase in assessment this year, or is it pretty close to what it has been in the past? Like if you'd done a house, say 4 years ago, and you did it should be reassessed for this year's tax purpose, right?
It's reassessed, it's indexed annually, like it might be physically re-inspected every 5 years, on a 5-year cycle. So it'll be into the yard, knock on the door, if there's decks, basement finish, any new any additions that doesn't have a permit. That's what basically the assessment is. Otherwise, it's the rates, the land rates, construction rates are done indexed annually in the office. So if your house in 2018 was $150 a square foot to build new, that rate in 2019 is $155. So that's reflected in the assessment. So that's where that inflation basically is measured on that 10, from the 30 million to 10 million. So what was the 1%? 1% inflation, 2% growth. We're split pretty close to that amount.
that answer your question?
Well, kind of, but I was more thinking, of the value, because you base it sort of on sales in an area too, like if you had a dozen houses in the hamlet and 2 of them sold, don't you kind of base it on that, a little bit of that too?
It's a 3-year average of the sales as well,
Okay.
so. And the sales actually get indexed to, July of the previous year. So July 2018 is our base year. The sales are all based at that point. So, I mean, overall, you're continually updating it, between 1% and 2% a year annually, just inflation. Plus whatever anything new over and above that you put in there is like.
Well, I guess it just, I was trying to get out of you, if you're not facing, say, a $13 decrease, likelihood you won't see that because of the adjustments, right?
There's a good
Yeah.
chance.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right. That assessment, the Hamlet assessment of 220, it could be, if that was last year's assessment, it'd be like 223 probably this year. Or the non-residential 775, it would be 7.
Any questions?
So I did just do a chart here just to show you kind of the split, and this is on the municipal portion of the taxes, that we receive almost half of our tax bracket, which is the $15 million from non-residential properties. And then the other is kind of a 30-20 split between farmland and non-residential, farmland and residential. That's just a breakdown basically of how we collect the municipal portion. And that is it. So what we're looking for today is approval of these rates here, these 4 at the top. And first, second, third reading of the bylaw. And the bylaw basically just lists kind of this chart only in legal bylaw format of it. So, are there any other questions? As you can see here, the residential is 4.4197, non-residential is 8.8441. So as the one slide said, that's kind of your past philosophy has been a 2-to-1 ratio. Let's get some current numbers if you're interested in the city. Like the city's non-residential rate, I know for 2018 was almost 20 mils.
2019 is 20.4.
Yeah.
And their residential is 8.6116.
So they're almost double for residential mill rate, and they're over double for their non-residential mill rates. Their farmland rate though is considerably lower. I think it's around 8 as well. But we know that we're high on farmland because we have more of it than they do. So, but yeah, non-resident, residential, I mean, quite a big difference.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the Hall Road network, I thought we were gonna keep that at 0, and I know it's just a fraction out of it. What kind of reasoning goes for that?
It's just the way that the inflation, the growth worked out on the assessment numbers, that it came in at that. I mean, it's basically negligible, 0.03. But there is a slight increase. It didn't even equate to anything on this. Like it was below $1 change for the year, so it's just the way the formulas work out with the dollar value of assessment for that. The farmland assessment did go down just slightly. I think I showed you that one. Right here it went, oh, sorry. Right here, farmland assessment went down 50,000, so you have to bring that number up just a tiny bit higher to make up that difference. But it was just ever so slightly.
And that's the tax rate, not the amount collected from the farmland.
Steve? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So a year like this, it sure shows how important growth is, where you have a 1% increase and it more or less is offset and turns most of the tax bills into lower on the municipal tax portion anyway.
Yeah, I think it's considered equal. I I think residentially, I don't think you'll see too much of a change in your tax, and maybe even a slight decrease, because the education and the Green Acres went down. Green Acres went down 3.5, so,
Yeah,
yeah.
negligible on most properties.
Any other questions? Could use a motion then, if you're willing to move first reading of bylaw 19-0-16. One. Any discussion? Call for the question, those in favor, those opposed, carried. And the second reading, Steve?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'll move second reading of bylaw 19-16, 2019 tax mill rate.
Any further discussion? Call the question, those in favor, those opposed? And to go to third, it has to be unanimous. Ken? Discussion, call for the question, those in favor, those opposed? Carried. And third and final reading. Bob? Any discussion? Call the question, those in favor, those opposed? Carried. Thank you.
Thanks, Les.
Thank you.
Okay, we're down to item K, page 87 to 89, 2019 Municipal Council External Salary Review.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and County Council. I am here today to present the administration report to conduct an external compensation review. Administration is seeking approval to issue a request for proposal, or an RFP, to conduct an external salary review of administration and council wages. On December 10th of last year, administration wages were frozen, and we included in that correspondence, we said that we would go to market and gather some data to be able to make future compensation decisions. Labor costs, of course, are the single largest expenditure for Lethbridge County, and making sure we make thorough, thought-out, sound decisions will affect our ability to effectively provide services to our citizens and our overall financial position as an organization, as well as our ability to attract, motivate, and retain the best staff possible. So we are, the recommendation is that County Council approve the issuance of a request for proposal for an outside agency to perform this wage review for county administration and council positions. We're requesting a maximum of $50,000, and the funds for this project be transferred from the 2019 Municipal Sustainability Initiative, the MSI operating grant. There's room available to use those funds this year.
Did you say where there is room to be?
There is
room
to use those funds this year. Do you have any questions?
Any questions? Ken?
Just wondering, why would it, could you separate council and administration?
We definitely could separate council and administration. We know that administration right now is waiting for some compensation information to make future decisions. And I believe there's a few things pending on council wages as well. So we thought if we're going to market, we could include both of those. Probably save money by doing it in one stop. But if that is something that you're interested in, that's definitely a direction that we could take under consideration.
I'll prefer council to be separated.
Well,
Tracy?
thank you, Mr. Chairman. It would be conducted separately from administration, because they would seek council surveys from other municipalities as well. It would just be done by the same consultant, so that you wouldn't have to go out twice to do two separate projects. You wouldn't be lumped in with administration. They would conduct two separate reviews within the same project, right, Dana?
Yes, for sure. Sorry, for all the positions would be looked at separately, right, for each position. The request here is just for the RFP to include both employee groups, but the information would for sure be separate, and the recommendations that come out of that could be be reviewed.
Okay, so the standards that they would be doing the review on, who would make those, excuse me, who would be making those questions?
So those things would be included in our request for proposal, who we would compare to, you know, how big the scope or what the scope of that project is, and those are all definitely important things that need to be considered, and I think that direction should go through the CAO and be included in the report before we issue the RFP.
So I think you answered Ken's question. I wasn't quite sure. Were you asking who would be the person from staff or from Lethbridge County who kind of looks after this, that puts it together, or are you asking who's sending it out, or I'm not quite sure what you were asking. Or both? Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So, yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, so for Ken's question, I think, you know, we don't know who's gonna get this RFP awarded to them. We put out an RFP and definitely look through the merits of those, who, you know, is coming in and is able to do the scope of work, the timelines that we're looking for, the financial figures that we're looking for. So we don't know that exact information at this moment. We would find that out through the RFP process. Who we're gonna compare to, that is information that if you have concerns or things, that I think we do have a compensation philosophy now that we have, that we've launched in 2014. If we're looking for major edits to that, I think those are conversations that should happen between council and the CAO before we put out the RFP.
Yeah, because I personally had some concern for the lady who did it, because I don't think really compared apples and apples to apples. It was kind of a mixed breed. And I fully realize that the one largest problem we have with all of this is that people won't always tell you or give you information.
Yes.
So, it's really hard to compare sometimes. Like, for instance, to compare us to the city is not really right either, and I know that's one of the players that we used in 2014.
Yeah, well, and, you know, we're competing in the same talent pool, right? So those are all considerations that need to be considered. But if there are, you know, certain parameters and things that you're looking for, I think those should definitely be included in discussions that are had with the CAO as we prepare, you know, this request is to get the money to put together the RFP. Through that time as we're preparing the RFP, making sure that we understand the scope and what council's looking for, that we can meet those objectives, I think is definitely important. Compensation is very tricky. That's why I don't want to do it either internally. It's better done by an outside third party where you're getting unbiased information to be able to make those decisions on.
Any other questions? Oh, Steve.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The plan is to do this every 5 years, and it's been,
Yeah.
has it been 5 years since the last?
Yeah, we said 3 to 5 years is kind of where we've targeted, and the last time we went to market was in 2014, so we're
Okay.
definitely lined up. And as I said, we're currently in a position where we aren't having any movement this year, so making sure that we have information to make decisions for next year is important.
It's been longer for council, though. I don't know that we've ever gone to market officially for council. We've done it kind of internally compared to some municipalities, but we've never done an external consultant review for councils.
Yeah, for council, I think it's important to get that done finally. Unfortunately, the number's gonna be a little skewed just because of the federal tax laws that came in place last year. Some municipalities have upped their rates considerably just to offset that tax, but I mean, that's something
Things that definitely could be considered and
it's
looked at.
something
in
that's
the
happened
scope
over
for sure,
here.
yeah, for RFP.
Well, and two, the one, like when you talk about northern Alberta, they pay way more than we ever think of because they got so much money, some of them, or had so much money. Like, I don't know, like, that could be very, very changing after listening to those people gripe last week in Red, or this week in Red Deer, holy cow. Go ahead, Tracy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think too with council, as I mentioned in those other reports that we brought forward recently here, is that councilors, especially per diem rates and stuff, are calculated so vastly different among municipalities. Some are salary, some are per diem, some are both, combinations. So that's a little trickier for councilors too, right? Like staff pretty much are all salary per job in the province, but the way councilors' wages are calculated are so different from municipality to municipality. It'd be interesting to see what they come back with.
So the only exception to that would be you have somebody on contract, right? And it may not necessarily have anything to do with like wages you would pay for that position normally, or how does that work?
Well, I think CAO is the only one that we have on a contract position, right? Is that what you're kind of mean?
Well, I was just thinking of, well, I'm gonna use it across the street. They have a couple of people there who are on contract only.
I'm not sure, I'm,
Like the lawyer, for instance, and people
Yeah.
like that, they don't work.
yeah, maybe, but I know we have had a couple contract positions at the airport and whatnot, and even though it's considered a contract position, it's built around the rate for that position anyways, so, same with like CAO, some are contracts, some aren't, but they're all.
They're pretty
kind of-
similar.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah, lawyers and stuff, I'm not sure how they would fit in differently, but luckily we don't have them on
We don't
staff.
have one anyway, so. Any other questions? Seeing none, do you want, somebody wanna make a motion to proceed, or what do you feel? Do you feel $50,000 is enough, or too much, or not enough, or what do you think? I have no idea.
I definitely hope that it comes in under that dollar figure. We just wanted to be sure that we did have the funds, it didn't have to come back. We won't really know until we put out the RFP what these quotes are coming back for. We definitely not expecting it to be 50,000. However, we have left a little bit of.
Lots?
Yeah, if you feel comfortable with working with that $50,000, then, you know, I'll make the motion that county council approve the insurance of the RFP for an outside agency to perform a wage review for county administration and council positions for maximum $50,000. Funds for this project will be transferred to the 2019 MSI.
Any further discussion? Call the question, those in favor? Those opposed?
Thanks, Dana.
Thank you.
very much.
Yeah.
Is that worrying?
No, I said the hot seat.
I'll be right
Thank you very much for your time.
An informal break, I would call it. Sort of quasi recess. We just had to take what do you believe would be a short phone call.
Larry, you want me to stop it?
Yeah.
You just continue what you're doing this morning.
Why doesn't Ken just take over for the invitation?
You could. Yeah.
Here you go.
There we go.
Here it goes. Is he okay, Lord?
Not out yet.
Oh.
So, did you do the invitation? No, we didn't do that. Okay. But we got one other thing too. Oh, that one too, yeah. Oh, two other things. Okay. So we have an invitation for the 2019 graduation ceremony for Picture Butte High School. And Larry, you want to take a
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So on page 90 and 91 of your council agendas, you will see the short report written by our CAO, Ed Mitchell. Page 91 is the actual invitation from the Picture Butte High School for the read or a guest to attend the graduation ceremonies for the class of Picture Butte High School 2019 on May 25th, 2019. All ceremonies will be held at the Picture Butte High School. The convocation exercises are open to everyone and begin at 11 a.m. The banquet and dance are by invitation only, hence this letter. That begins at 6 p.m. They would like us to respond, and I'm not sure, Mr. Chairman, Reeve, if you were available to go, yeah, sorry, respond as well, yes, by May 11th. So this is our last council meeting before this date, so hopefully we can come up with a plan and someone might be able to attend from the council.
Well, is there somebody who would like to attend? Morris, you have your hand up there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have been at a couple of them before, and there is, of course, you know, the town of Picture Butte always uses that figure, 80%, and I would say it's probably about 80% of the county residents what use that, and we're gonna be graduating at probably 80% from the county. So it is very important, I think, that someone is gonna attend that.
You wanna finish your sentence?
Silent over there.
Because later,
I can, I'm not sure what you want me to finish on there, but I can certainly finish it off, and I moved up the, what's his name over there, Shiny, Claus Benefine, that he goes through it.
You accept,
He's a camera.
you accept part of going clause, not the other part.
But then on the other hand, Mr. Chairman, I
Yes.
haven't quite finished that because I would like to attend to, because if it is possible that day, what is the date? 25th of May. I think we're leaving on the 26th or 27th.
yeah, that's Saturday, we leave on soon after.
Lots of time.
Okay, thank you. Well, it is a long day, to be honest with you. It's a cat off. But anyway, it's a long day, it's a stressed out day, yes, yeah, but all.
So these have two people who are going, Claus and Morris.
Well, Morris, if you are willing to go, then I don't see why we have to be there with two people.
No, Dan, that's fine, if you only think one person can go, then you go ahead.
No.
You two go out in the hall and fight over it for a few minutes, when one of you comes back, we'll move on.
You went to high school, yeah, didn't you?
Yeah, they could go as a couple.
You didn't learn that, you didn't learn how, they could have done that.
Did you hear what the counselor said, what the reef said?
No.
You could go as a couple.
Who's wearing the dress?
So who's going?
I'll go.
And are you still wanting to go too, or not? No. Okay, well, here's it there. We're gonna call for the question. Those in favor? Those opposed? Carried. I think we have in-camera thing.
No, good.
Yes, we got the notice of motion you wanted to bring up.
I can't know what it's been said. So I don't, there's a notice of motion on the agreement. It's for, like, what was it, Strathcona?
To host the 2020 Provincial Ag Service for Summer 2.
Don't shake your head.
Anyways, we don't need to vote on it, it's just a notice
Notice
of
of
motion.
motion.
Okay? So do we have anything else to be in here? I believe that's it. Okay, yeah, right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe there is a short kind of verbal report that Councillor Benson would like to give, and it has to do with a matter whereby the county is being asked in some capacity to provide some aspect of support. I believe it might just be a letter or something like that. I don't think it's financial in nature. Although Councillor.
Are we on camera? Are we
No,
on
no.
camera?
No, not yet.
We're getting a reason why we're getting there.
Oh,
Okay, just checking.
Thank you. So you know, as we all know, we need to provide notice outwardly to everyone listening and to the public why we would go into a closed meeting. And of course, the Municipal Government Act states that councils and committees may close all or part of their meetings if one of the matters to be discussed falls under one of the exceptions listed in the Freedom of Information Protection and Privacy Act, which in this case I would put forth that it does, because this name that is going to be discussed by Councillor Benson is meant to be kept confidential, so that the person who is subject to the benefit of the support and ultimate, you know, accolades or award or you know, having some honor bestowed upon him won't know, and the public won't know. And so I put forth that we should move to a closed meeting under section 19 of the FOIP Act, confidential evaluations, whereby the municipality may refuse to disclose personal information about an applicant that is evaluative or opinion-based and is going to be used for the purpose of determining the applicant's suitability, eligibility, etc., for the awarding of benefits by a public body when that information is provided explicitly or implicitly in confidence. I believe that meets the test. Council ultimately can decide.
Thank you for not making me say that.
So who's moving to go into closed session then?
All those are.
All in favor?